Welcome back to From Overlooked to Consistently Booked. I'm Meaghan Chitwood, and today we're talking about a shift that most business owners have to make to help their business grow, but they are very rarely prepared to make that shift. So today I want to introduce Jason Sanders with Comfort Masters of Northern Alabama, an HVAC company. And you have a brilliant story about going from you being the technician to being the business owner. So first, tell us your story.
Well, thanks for calling it brilliant. Basically, I was working for other companies, and the industry was going in a direction that I personally objected to. And I said, you know what, I don't want to do that. And I was too old, or at least I felt like I was too old to be trying to change careers. So I went out on my own. And, the first thing I knew I had to do was to tell everybody, because I couldn't have started at a worse time. The HVAC industry is very seasonal. Very seasonal. And I started at the very end of peak season. And then there will be a long gap before you have another peak season. So I knew that I had to find a way to tell people. And it's not enough to just get on Facebook and say, hey, everybody. So I knew about B&I. So I started shopping for a good B&I chapter for myself. And so that was it. I found the right chapter. I joined, and I made a contact there that was, I'm just going to say, was the difference, in me making it that year and me not making it that year. And it came down to the fact they're a property manager, and here was a guy who could send me a ton of work even during the slow season. And so that's pretty much how I got off the ground. And then I stayed a one-man show for the entire first year and a little bit into the second year. And, at some point, I was doing some small job. It wasn't anything major at all. And I got lightheaded. My heart rate jumped up real crazy high. And I was like, well, I never had anything like this before. I don't know what's going on. Let me call the doctor. And there was a long period of, doctors move slow. They don't do anything in a hurry. And so there was a long period of time where there was just worry. And I'm like, man, what was that? And, with my family history, I was convinced I had a heart attack. Yeah. And I probably shouldn't have asked Google, because Google was convinced I had a heart attack too, Turns out it was nothing. It was just something happens when you get older, So, at the end of the day, I still had that period of time where my mind ran away with itself, and we can be our own worst enemy sometimes, So over that period of time, I had to ask myself, is it because I've been working too much? Because let me tell you, that first year was not easy. It was a grind. And I said, I got to slow down. I either have to get rid of this business and get a regular job, or I have to go all in and go big. So I decided to go all in, and that's how we got here today.
So how many trucks do you have now?
So I have 4 trucks running on the roads. We have, and in my truck, we have a spare truck. We have enough. Even though we buy all new trucks, they break down.
Have a spare, smart, redundancy.
I got one in the shop right now. I've got, my office has a truck, a dedicated truck that the office person drives. And it may seem counterintuitive, but I can't tell you how many times that it's made the difference in finishing up all of our calls for the day. Being able to call the office and say, hey, go here before they close and pick this part up for us. Yes. So she's got a truck for that. And I just bought another truck on the way here, because we're
nice.
Yeah, we're getting ready. We're getting ready for this summer.
For the next thing. And then how much technician work do you still do?
Not as much as I kind of would like to. If I'm being honest, as the business has gotten a little bigger, it amazes me how little time there is in a day to handle all those little odds and ends. And you think this thing will only take a few minutes. Nothing ever goes that way. And the next thing you know, man, the day's over and businesses are closing. But when we get really, really backed up, man, I grab the stuff and go, because, we got to help the guys out. We try to finish every call that day so that the next day is a clean slate.
Wow. That's amazing. So how you're building, I guess that's how you're building your system, is how do we make sure that we've got ample people to be able to get all the calls done today?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I always tell my guys, is people won't wait. They will call another company, and I don't want them to have to wait. I don't want them to call another company. I want to knock those jobs out today so that I'm ready to go again tomorrow.
Yeah. So your story wasn't I'm too busy, thus I have decided I'm going to. You had like this scare that happened. It was like, okay, I either have to figure out a way to start scaling this so that I can hold the same standard that I ultimately had, but then, and ultimately not have a heart attack, right?
Right.
So what was it like to hire that first person who was going to be the face to your customers?
Man, that was an ordeal. I'm just going to tell you right now, and I'm going to step on some toes. Indeed took me nowhere.
Yeah.
Well, they took my money. That's what Indeed took.
Yeah.
I put some stuff on, hiring groups on Facebook. I got nowhere. It literally was just a guy who called me and said, hey, I saw your company through a Google search. I'm unhappy where I'm at. Are you hiring? I couldn't believe he called because I was actually, this is crazy, interviewing people. And I had this conversation with other business owners. And one of the things that the guy said to me that, man, it just punched me in the chest. He said, I know you're not happy with who you're interviewing, but this is the workforce we have to work with. You're going to have to find a way to make those guys work. I was going to have to hire two people. One guy who had a bunch of experience, but he didn't have a driver's license because he had a lead foot. And another guy who was brand new and didn't know how to do anything, but he had a driver's license.
Wow.
That was the position that I was in. And then, suddenly I get a call from this guy unexpectedly, and he says all the right things. He says, hey man, I got 20 years experience. I've been doing this a long time. The company that I'm working for was bought out by, venture capital, and they're changing everything. And they're going to this new business model, which what he described is what I was running away from. And I just told him, I said, man, me and you got to have lunch like yesterday.
Yeah.
And we did. We had lunch that same day, and I made him an offer.
And did he work out?
He did. He's still with me today.
Oh, that's amazing. I think it's awesome when he saw your vision and was you mentioned running from the same thing you were running from. So the two of you can just lock in and really ultimately make that happen.
Yeah. And he brings a lot of experience to the table that I don't even have. I am an HVAC guy, but he's an HVAC guy from Miami. And they do things there so differently. And there's been a lot of times when we've run into challenges where I'm like, I'm not sure how we're going to get around this problem. And he has a good answer, And so I'm lucky to have him.
Yeah.
Lucky to have him.
Have you had an experience where it hasn't gone so great and you wondered, like, why did I ever trust this person with a customer facing position?
Yes. Yeah. We actually hired a guy. He passed. We background check everyone.
Yeah.
We don't hire people without experience. He passed he checked all the boxes, came highly recommended from someone that I trust. And we began to send him out, and just some red flags, and I thought, well, let me just address those. And he always said the right thing until he didn't,
Yeah.
And then one day we got a customer complaint, and the complaint was extremely vague. And I kind of took it with a grain of salt because this particular customer was a man who has his wife, she works, she's a stay-at-home mom. If we're ever there working on the air conditioner, she literally has to have the phone out in her hand where he can hear her the whole time we're there. He's so worried about us being there with him, not there. And I'm not saying anything bad about it. If that's the way you want to live, you do you. It's none of my business. But what I will say is that the guy, he wouldn't tell me what was said, and he would just kept telling me it was inappropriate. And I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that.
Yeah.
And so I kind of just addressed it with the employee, and he's like, what are you talking about? I don't know. And we let it go. Man, a week later, I got another complaint. Oh. And then the day after that, another. And, he wasn't just anything too wild. He just had some pretty eccentric and far out there beliefs. And he thinks everybody ought to believe the way he does. So instead of coming into that house and fixing an air conditioner, he wants to come to the house and realign the way you see the world.
Whoa.
Yeah. And I was like, hey, listen, man, I hired you to be an HVAC tech. If you want to change the world, go change the world on your own time.
Yeah.
And we ended up having to let him go. But if I'm being honest, he's really the only bad experience that we've had with a technician.
What do you think your key to success is for the person? So we're talking to people who might feel uncomfortable about leaving their role as technician, letting go a little bit and really creating a system. What advice would you give that person?
It's hard to let go because when I come to somebody's house, I don't want to leave a stone unturned, Yeah. But I also know that your technicians, they have a pressure on them that's different than the pressure I have. Mm-hmm. And so they may not necessarily do things the way that I would do them. And it was hard to let go. And there's a phrase that I have to tell myself sometimes. If you gathered up 10 HVAC service contractors, and gave them all the same problem, you'd probably get 7 answers and 6 of them would still be right.
Yeah.
And so I have to ask myself a handful of questions. Is it going to get the job done? Is it going to cause harm to anybody? If their way works, let their way work. Do the customers like them? And so letting go, you just got to do it. You just got to let go of some of that control, and I think you'll be all right.
Those were brilliant 3 questions to ask yourself, because I too have had the challenge where it's like, I do it 100% right. They're going to get it 70% right, but 70% is better than 70% of somebody else's is better than 100% of mine. So it's just kind of like, yeah, you've just ultimately got to let it go. That's fantastic.
There's been so many times that I said, well, that's not the way I would have done it. But at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with what they did.
Yeah.
And that was a hard thing to let go. And then that gives me an opportunity to say, hey, in the future, this is how I would prefer, you to do this.
Absolutely. So on the next episode, we're going to actually talk about training teams and how do you get that consistency so it feels like your brand. And Jason's going to stick around with us to share even more nuggets about how you can ultimately make that happen. So join us next week as we release our next episode of From Overlooked to Consistently Booked.